Easter. You are the early birds, and I appreciate you deeply. Thank you. I have a story to share with you this morning from our book of the month, The Healing Power of Humor. I am reading from page 185. Once upon a time, a great king went hunting with his closest companions. They paused at the top of a hill from which they could see for miles around. As the king surveyed his domain with its rich fields and bustling cities, tears came to his eyes. He thought of his palaces and friends, the honor and the wealth that belonged to him, and the love of his people. To think that one day I must die and leave all this behind, the king lamented. The nobles with him started thinking, and soon they began commiserating with their king. They too would lose palaces, riches, and honors when they died. Imagine if we could live forever, the king said. Aye, his nobles agreed, their eyes bright at the thought of immortality. One lord among them laughed. We should never have to leave all this, the king went on, ignoring the interruption, but the noble laughed again. This happened several more times until the king himself demanded the reason for the noble's mirth. The Lord bowed. I cannot keep my joke from you, Majesty, although I hesitate to say it. I imagined what it would be like if we all lived forever, if there were no death. Why then, the first king would still live among us, and the great sage, the immortal emperor, and the fearless general too. Compared with them, I and my fellow lords would be fit only to be rice planters, and you, Majesty, you would be a clerk. Imagine that. I could not help laughing. The other lords held their breaths, fearing the king's wrath. After a tense moment, the king laughed. He raised his drinking glass and turned to the other lords. For encouraging my foolishness, I penalize each of you a drink of wine. And as for you, the king told the laughing lord, whenever I bewail my death again, you are to cry out, a clerk, a clerk. I'm going to read today's affirmation, and then I'll invite you to join me. Seeing the funny side of life comes naturally to me. Laughter transforms me and transforms any situation I find myself in. I refuse to take anything too seriously, and I always remember, if it's going to be funny later, it's funny now, and so it is. Please stand and join me with conviction. Seeing the funny side of life comes naturally to me. Laughter transforms me and transforms any situation I find myself in. I refuse to take anything too seriously, and I always remember, if it's going to be funny later, it's funny now, and so it is. Sorry, hey Pete, can I have a little hug there? I need some hugging action going on here. God bless you. Thank you, brother. Thank you. So grateful for you. Hey, Pete and I are old friends from an old church. Well, not an old church, you know what I mean. God bless you. It's great to have you here, Peter Kirkland. Hey, there's a story. We're kind of a storytelling people, aren't we? There's a story that's about 2,000 years old, and it's about a man. And it's about a man who was born humbly, who was raised as kind of a regular guy, who actually, it turns out, was teaching in the temple by the time he was about 12. It's about a man who disappeared for some number of years. We don't know much about him from 12 to about 30. And at 30, this man started a ministry of love and truth, a ministry of grace, a ministry of social justice and inclusion, a ministry of caring for the sick and the poor and the immigrant, a ministry of love, a ministry of truth. And he walked in this ministry for about 3 years. And a series of events came about that he was betrayed by his dearest friend, and the next day he was betrayed even by his followers. And the day after that, he was crucified and died. And on the morning, 2 days later, he rose up. He was resurrected and lived again, and ultimately ascended to some other form that we know perhaps something, but actually very little about. It's a compelling story, isn't it? Is it true? I ran it through Snopes. And I didn't get any confirmation one way or the other. And you know, things that happened 2,000 years ago, that was a long time ago, wasn't it? Things that happened 2,000 years ago and that weren't even written down for another 60 to somewhere 80 years after that. I don't know. I don't think any of us really knows if the story is true, so I don't know if I believe the story. Here's what I do believe in. I believe in the power of story to change our lives. I believe in the power of story to guide and direct us on our path as we walk through this life. I believe in the power of story to inspire us, to guide us, to call us to a greater being. I believe in the power of story to provide us with examples of how we might walk this path that we call life. You see, we are a storytelling people, aren't we? And we get to choose which stories we are going to tell. And we get to extract from the stories we tell the lessons that we believe are most important. We get to use story to guide us in our thinking about this journey of life. And so the Easter story, this story that we tell about this remarkable man, is an opportunity for us to look at these themes of death and resurrection, endings and renewal. It's an opportunity for us annually. Every year we do this, right? Every year I'm like, oh man, the Easter sermon, what's it going to be? Right? We tell this story every year. And isn't it a brilliant thing that we have these annualized events like Easter and Christmas to remind us, to re-anchor us in the stories of our lives? What a blessing. And so here we have this story of the ministry and the betrayal and the crucifixion and the death and the entombment and the resurrection of this regular guy who's certainly a lot like you and me. You know, really. He was a human being. He was a son of the divine. Certainly. But which of us has not been called sons and daughters of God? I mean, he told us we are all sons and daughters of God. And so we have an opportunity to look at this story of death and resurrection, ultimate loss and renewal into the light, and see what it has for us. And so I want to ask you, why do we die? Why do we die? Well, you heard in our reading this morning another story of life and death that kind of addressed that, didn't it? Why do we die? We die so that something new may be born. And don't you love it that as something new is born, there is an evolution of the wholeness and the allness of humanity? Isn't it beautiful that as we die, we make room for the newness? We make room for the evolution of all of humanity, indeed, of the universal presence of the allness that we call God. We make opportunities for God to know itself better in more and more form. Whenever I bewail my death, remind me, a clerk. Have you bewailed any deaths lately? Any losses? Sit with that for a moment. A clerk. So if we died to make room for something new, why did Jesus die? So something new could be known, so something could rise into the consciousness of humanity, so that something could be born. Something that was unknown before this time. He died so that we could know the truth more fully of who and whose we are, so that we could step more confidently into our own betrayals, our own losses, our own darkness, and know, oh, there's a story to inspire me. There's an example to open my heart. And I'll tell you, this to me is what the salvation truly is. You know, you hear in a more traditional teaching, you hear that he died to save us from our sins. Well, we know that our sins are nothing but a mistake. I spilled the milk, clean it up. This is the deepest meaning. We miss the mark. A sin is about missing the mark, making a mistake. He came to save us in the sense that he came to show us a way of being present to our mistakes and being lifted into the light. Why did Jesus die? To make room for the new, so something can be born, something can rise. And so what is your story? It's interesting to me, isn't it? It happened 2,000 years ago. I don't know if it really even happened. But it's happening every day, which to me is actually evidence that it really happened, right? These mythical stories that are happening every day in our own lives give us a clue as to the past, don't they? So our story, we must release our old lives, our habits, our ideas, the things that are keeping us entombed, so that we may rise into a new story. Now, I talk about this a lot. I use a lot of different language to talk about it, don't I? But this is kind of the main theme of our lives. How will we use our lives to evolve and grow? And you know, one of the things I hear a lot from people as we kind of explore this notion is, but it's hard to rise. Right? Because I don't know about you, but when I'm in the middle of the dark place, frankly, I don't want to hear about the light. When I'm in the middle of the dark place, I can't even see the light. And I don't want to hear about the light from you, because what that tells me is you don't get it. It's hard to rise. You know, the only thing harder than rising is not rising. The only thing harder than rising is staying stuck in the old. The only thing harder than rising up into the new life that is the promise, it's God's promise for us, is staying stuck. And I don't know, sometimes I get really committed to staying stuck. Sometimes I get really committed to the dark. I get really committed because it's almost like I want to be right that life is really hard. I want to be right that things are dark. I want to be right that things are bad. More than I want to be freed by the salvation of the Spirit. More than I want to rise and be lifted in a new way of being. The only thing harder than rising is staying stuck. Dang. Hate that part. You know, 2 weekends ago we had a work party here, and we had 28 people come and work in our yards, in our garden. It was an awesome day. It was pouring down rain. I mean, people were totally geared up. Go look at our Facebook page. You can see them. Like, they're in their boots and slickers and hats. But you know, people worked in our yard. And the other day I thought, I'm going to walk around and really look at all the things that have been done and bless and thank and consciousness all the people who were out working in our yard. And as I was walking around, I noticed something. There's a lot of things growing out there. There's little things coming up all over the place. And on the trees, there's little blossoms coming out. There's all kind of stuff happening out there. And as I was walking around and I was blessing each little area and I was giving thanks for the people, and in some cases I was really aware of who had been working in that area, and in some cases I wasn't so sure, but you know, God knows, right? As I was walking around and I was considering and I was watching growth, it actually suddenly occurred to me, you know what? Do you know that right now in Australia, it's fall? Do you know that right now in Australia things are kind of dying and it's getting dark? Do you know that it's pretty much always spring or summer somewhere? And it's almost pretty much always winter or fall somewhere. Things are either growing or dying somewhere. What? Could this be a natural cycle of life? This notion that I must die to the old and embrace the new, could this be what life is about? Could it be that even in the darkest night of my soul, it is springtime somewhere? And could I connect to that idea that there is light in the dark even when I can't see it? Can I open my heart to the truth that when I am in the darkest tomb and it's sealed tightly and I feel dead, that I am limited only by my perception? I heard someone say recently, it was something like, sometimes life, it feels like I'm a fly on the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel. Walking around. I cannot see what angels and gods lie beneath the threshold of my perception. I'm a fly on the ceiling. I'm in the tomb where it's dark. And I cannot see what angels and gods abide just below the threshold of my perception, but I can be assured they are there, even as the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel is painted so beautifully. But if I'm up here, I can't see it. If the lights are out, I can't see it. If I am in the tomb, I cannot see it, but I can know with faith and confidence. The Spirit of the infinite life of God is right where I am. I cannot be separated from it. And yet, oh, there I am, bewailing my death. I don't want to let go. I want the old way. I don't want to die. Well, guess what? Do you want to experience newness? Something's got to go. We must leave something behind. And so, are you ready to rise? Are you ready to embrace the notion that even in the darkest tomb there is a light? Even in the darkest night of your soul, there is an infinite something that is there for you, that is supporting you, that is energizing you, that is growing you, that is providing you with the resurrection and the ascension into something greater, into the very mind of God itself, into the very heart of the universe. Are you ready to rise? How do you rise? You know, I don't know about you, but I'm guessing it was pretty dark in that tomb. Do you think it would have helped anybody, would have helped Jesus, or that it might help you in the midst of the dark to say, oh no, it's light in here. It's light in here. It's good. I'm not dead. I'm all right. Do you think that helps? See, if we want to rise, we must first acknowledge the dark. We have to stop denying that we are in the dark place. We have to allow ourselves to be available to the dark place and the lessons that it has for us. And we have to stop resisting that and see what the dark has to teach us. Because we're not going to transcend the dark. We're not going to get out of the dark until we learn what the dark came for. And remember, the only thing harder than rising is not rising. And one of the reasons it's hard to not rise is it's such an effort to push down the dark. It's such an effort to be in denial about what's going on. That's what Peter did. Peter denied his teacher, didn't he? How well did that work for him? Not so well. And so our first opportunity in this, our first consciousness in this opportunity to rise must be having the courage and the faith and the presence to face the dark places. To be present to the dark places in the consciousness that there is a light at the center. Knowing that this Sistine Chapel of our lives, we are just really focused on one little part. And even though I can't see the light, I can rest in the consciousness that there is the light. I can have the courage and the faith and the presence, knowing that I am sustained by the living one, the infinite presence that I cannot be separate from. And it will walk with me through the dark place. And it will be the light at the center. So stop denying that it's dark in there. It was really seriously dark in here. What does the dark have for me? What is the gift? Where is the presence that I know will sustain me through it? I read a story, it's been about a year ago now, so I won't get it completely right, but I was quite impressed with this young man. He was an artist, and he began to develop, he showed it had pictures of his art. He was an amazing artist, and he began to develop this condition, this tremor in his right hand, and that's not a good thing for an artist, yeah? And yet, you know what? He went to doctors, he got diagnoses, all of these things, and it was just a general essential tremor. It was an essential tremor, right? And there's really no cure for that. And he went to a number of neurologists and doctors, and he finally went to one doctor, and he said, but you don't understand. We have to be able to cure this because I'm an artist. That's who I am. That's what I do. And the doctor looked at him, and the doctor said, embrace the shake. And he went, huh? And he went home and he started to think about this, embrace the shake, and he started doing art with squiggles. His art is amazing. He embraced the shake, he embraced the dark place, and he incorporated this tremor into his line art, into his way of creating art. The doctor gave him the clue, the light at the center of the darkness, but he had to run with it, didn't he? He had to do something with it. I read just recently, Liza Minnelli said, reality is something you rise above. Reality is something you rise above. I mean, he has this reality, right? And then he rose above it, and he incorporated this reality into his beingness to inform his art and have it become even more beautiful than it was before. So stop denying it. Embrace the shake. Embrace it. See what it has for you. See what the gift is. And an important part of this process is to surround yourself with people who are also rising. Yes? Because, I don't know, if you're surrounded with people who are more interested in being stuck than in rising, it's going to be harder to rise, right? Because it just rubs off on us. like what the people around us are doing, it becomes our comfort zone, doesn't it? And so we must surround ourselves with people who are also facing their dark places, embracing their shakes, if you will, and stepping forward in faith that these people are on a similar path. They understand me, they're going to support me, they love me. They've been in the dark place, and when I can't see the light, when I am in the midst of my winter, they will be my summer. Because sometimes I just need somebody to be my summer for a few minutes, or a few days, or a few weeks, or so. So we must have support because it takes courage, it takes faith, it takes persistence to embrace the shake, to face the dark. And so we're going to need some support. And then finally, at least finally for today anyway, we have to know that if we embrace the dark, that if we become willing to rise above conditions, guess what? Things are going to change. Oh no, not change. But they will. By definition, things will change. You see, as we leave the tomb, as we leave the darkness, it requires that we die to the old and leave it behind. And so things are going to change. And sometimes we might be, I didn't think that was going to happen. Or so, I had somebody once who really, she took on a really deep thing, and the change that really happened for her was she ended up moving across the country. It was scary. It was unexpected, and it turned out to be such a blessing for her. Things changed in a big way for her because of her willingness to embrace the darkness, to surround herself with support, to, when it became obvious that it was going to be a move, to just say, all right, I don't get it. But I know that the universe has something for me, and so I'm going to say yes to this and see what the thing is that the universe, that God, that the infinite presence has for me, because I have remained faithful to the principle. I have practiced, I have said yes. I have seen the light in the dark place. I have faced it with courage and faith and determination. I have been supported. And so something is happening here that is for me. It has to be. It simply has to be. Then as a side note, let me just say, I saw something on Facebook recently that I won't get exactly right, but I thought it was brilliant, that said, don't stay in a mistake just because you spent a long time making it. Did you do that? It's like, well, it's been 5 years. I guess I could just work out the last 3, or whatever it is. Don't stay in a mistake just because you spent a long time making it. Allow the salvation of Jesus, his example, support you in rising to above it, and not just above it, but beyond it, enriched, renewed, transcendent, knowing more fully than you ever have before who you are. And so the Easter story, this 2,000-year-old story that we tell, is here to remind us that when things end, it's not over. It's here to remind us that there's light in the dark places, and indeed the dark places are the seat of our strength. They are the seat of our power. They are the seat of our grace as we embrace and move through them. It's here to remind us that for every loss, something is found. It is here to remind us that for every betrayal, there is an awakening, a rising, to remind us that for every pain, there is a salve. A salve, do you know that? The root word of salvation, it's ointment. The root word salvation, it's ointment, the salve that you put on a wound. For every pain, there is a salvation. For every death, there is a resurrection. Stop bewailing your loss. Stop bewailing the dark places. Allow them to lift you. So let's turn within and see if we can't begin to anchor in this message of healing, of salvation, as we open our hearts to the power and the presence and the love of the Infinite One. As we allow to descend upon us like a mantle the peace that passes understanding, as we make ourselves available to the greater idea. And the power and the presence and the love of God, the infinite making itself known as us. We anchor ourselves in this presence right here and right now, and we know that this is the sustaining presence, the life of God. And as you simply allow this realization to permeate every cell in your body, every corner of your consciousness, every moment of your being, just bring to mind some dark place, something you've been wrestling with, a challenge, an idea, a thought, a habit from which you would like to be free. Simply bring it to mind and calmly, gently, with faith and conviction and presence, face it squarely. And declare in consciousness, condition, habit, idea, you have no power over me. My power is God's power. My power is the infinite power. My power is the presence of the living one in my heart and in my soul. This is my power. This condition has no power. I deny it. And I step with faith and confidence toward the light, knowing that even as the gods and angels of the Sistine Chapel exist, they exist in my life, calling me forth to something greater. And take a step now toward that something greater. Take a step. Simply say yes to that tiny light, and as you step toward it, it grows. It grows. As you take another step, it grows. And the stone is rolled away. You step free from the tomb of the lack, the limitation, the false idea, the thing that is keeping you stuck. And you simply allow yourself to stand in the light, the warm balm of sunshine moving through your being. And you simply say yes, rising, ascending, allowing yourself to understand more deeply than you ever have before, something greater than you are is lifting you now. And so knowing that you have been transformed by the renewing of your mind, give thanks, be changed, be made new. So I close this message with a grateful heart, knowing that we have indeed been transformed. God is good and all is well. And so it is. Amen.